Welcome and welcome back. This is going to be the first of a series of discussion type videos, just open vlog style videos they have on the channel. And I do apologize for not being as regular as I would like with posting on this channel so far in the past month or so. I do work at a retail pharmacy, and I have been sort of thrust into working 6 days a week. Last week, I worked 6 12-hour shifts just because of the pandemic that's going around. And it has forced me to be a little bit reflective on this pandemic. And it makes me wonder what type of world it is that will emerge from the coronavirus, what changes people might make, what will happen to the social fabric, if you will, in the wake of this plague. And the first thing that I really sort of have to reflect on, I was born in 1985. I definitely have memories of kindergarten, which would be 1990. I almost certainly have memories from before then, but I've always been one of these people that is sort of attracted to doomsday or apocalyptic type scenarios. And I think part of that is being born in that time frame. My young life was inundated by residual threats of the Cold War and from the fear and fear mongering that surrounded the AIDS epidemic. And the one thing that I am almost positive will change in the wake of this, in the wake of, is at least as far as I can remember, and again, I might be flawed in remembering these things, religiosity seemed to be on the uptick in the 90s, which was sort of as people, and it's hard to talk about this without, so in the way that when people speak about coronavirus, it comes across as if they are being callous towards older people. A lot of the conversation around the AIDS epidemic makes people sound callous towards gays, and in particular gay men. But there was a whole lot of resentment that sprang up around gay men in the 90s. And I think that caused a rash of religiosity. Not to say that it's the right response, not to say that, certainly to my understanding, the interpretation of any of the major religions is not favorable towards homosexuality. I'm not here to discuss that. I do live in Kansas City, Missouri, a town that is in the Bible Belt, that is traditionally Christian. And I grew up with a lot of that sentiment. I grew up around a lot of that type of sentiment. And it seems that in the 50s and 60s, there was a lot of movement. There were a lot of atheists in the political and lawmaking movements. And I believe even the president of Israel, one of the high-ranking people in Israel, I don't even was a professed atheist. Was someone who professed not believing in a God, in a personal God. And you couldn't see that today. You couldn't see that today. That wouldn't happen today. Not a lot of atheists in office. Not a lot of open atheists even running for things. And it is difficult to imagine that social burden going away. Even though I don't believe for a minute that Donald Trump is religious. I don't believe that Bill Clinton was religious. And there's a lot of conjecture that that Barack Obama was an atheist. So it is hard for me to believe that going forward from this event, this pandemic, that there's going to be, I think there's going to be an uptick in religiosity again. Um, to my experiences, that is for the worst because it tends to be a movement which limits others, and I hope that's a fair statement. It seems to be a move. There is no real, rational, atheistic, um, rational atheistic reasoning behind something like keeping gay marriage illegal. That seems to be predominantly a religious movement, which is limiting someone else. So I think that there's going to be an uptick in atheism. I think that on the basest of levels, the most basic of levels, there will probably also be a great deal more prepping. I don't mean doomsday type of prepping. I mean making sure that you have a bag of rice around, making sure that you have some cans of soup around, making sure that there are some things that you have which are going to be there should you need them. I don't think that there was a whole lot of that. I think that there, in this same sense, I don't know if any of you watch Sticks and Hammer 666. Anyone who was opposed to the religious rant that I just went on obviously does not watch Sticks, but he has also talked a little bit about gardening and how people should have some type of garden, and I think there will be an uptick in that sort of thing as well. It seems to be something. This, I bet, on the other side of this pandemic, sustainability becomes a primary talking point and a life point that many people yearn to make, that many people will take action on, that will be actionable for many communities. Not necessarily growing all sorts of things and having a full farm, but you grow your tomatoes. Maybe you've got some potatoes. Things like that. Simple things to grow that you can just go outside and have a meal or a part of a meal, something like that. I think there will be a great deal more of that. And along those lines, I think that there will be a surgence in solar roofs, possibly even Tesla Powerwalls. I think that the mainlining of sustainability is going to be the next growth sector in life, much in the same way that the sort of natural movement had been before. The whole free-range chickens, no additives, this sort of thing. I think a lot of that moving forward, that the energy behind that movement will be behind sustainability, will be behind self-sufficiency, things like that. And I think that that is ultimately for the best. I think that ultimately what that will also do is the more electric cars are on the road, the more solar roofs are going around, the more solar panels we have, the more living space batteries such as Tesla Powerwalls we have, the less dependence we have on other societies. And I think that that is going to grow out into localized manufacturing. There's going to be an uptick around that sort of thing as well. I think that smaller hub communities are going to become much more desirable. And because of that, if you don't have to have an oil power plant in your city because you're producing so much solar and wind power and being able to store that solar and wind power, our dependence on foreign nations, and I don't just mean in the United States, I think this is going to be worldwide. Any oil producing state would do better for themselves to consume their own oil, as much of their own oil as possible, to come off of that market. And we see that with the conflict between Russia and the Middle East on over OPEC right now. Uh, so these things like sustainability, hub communities, self-sufficiency, these things are going to become much more desirable, much more mainstream. Um, I think that off of the back of that, there will be a greater um, there will be greater public judgment of governments which are trying to go through a power grab. For example, there was, and Styx talked about this today too, there was a pastor in Florida who was arrested for giving mass. It's unconstitutional on many levels. I don't condone him giving that mass because it's dangerous right now. It should still be his right to do so. He should still be able to do so. This is not to say that he should be free from public, I won't say disgrace, but public judgment. He should be subject to that. But that should be the only condemnation for that, for such a thing. That is his constitutional right. So I think that public judgment for power, for governmental power grabs, is going to be through the roof. And I think a good deal of that is going to be because of the outcry against the Chinese government for how they've suppressed these numbers. And because I think that there will be more and more videos leak about how the government has treated Chinese people, treated their own citizens, treated people whether they were sick or not during this pandemic. So I think that's going to happen. I think that on the back of this and the fact that I think there's going to be widespread knowledge about the Chinese government and the suppression of their numbers, of their reporting, the fact that they disappeared some doctors. The doctors who had been reporting these things just disappeared them. I think that that's going to lead, and legacy media has been basically complicit in and through these events. And I think that is going to lead to an even greater distrust of the legacy media, which is going to further, I won't say evolve society into more hub-like situations. And I think the last thing, no, I think that I've got two things left to talk about. These hub communities, these central hub-like societal structures, whatever you want to call them, I think cities are going to become more important as a unit. Cities will grow stronger identities for the better and the worse around something like this, but it will lead to a stronger sense of community. I can't tell you how many people in the past few days I've offered toilet paper. I can't tell you how many people I have seen offer one another a favor or a good or something like this in the wake of this. I can't tell you how many people counterintuitively, perhaps ironically, perhaps dangerously, during this that I have seen spawn spontaneous conversation in aisles of stores. There wasn't a whole lot of that around here before. I think that's going to grow. I think that's going to get stronger. But the final thing that I think I want to talk about, and this is going to sound morbid, but that's not how I mean it. I think that this is a cold, hard fact that's going to spring up around this pandemic and is going to make things very difficult moving forward, going to make things very different moving forward. Once the grieving has subsided, once people have come to terms with all the people that have been lost, this disease doesn't target, but certainly discriminates people who are 50s and older. A good deal of the people who have fallen victim to the coronavirus have been over the age of 50. And again, I am not celebrating this, but I think that it is something that is going to be a noticeable effect on the world. There is going to be a large shift of wealth in the wake of this. And I don't think that that shift of wealth is going to have quite the radical social appendages that one might presume. I think that the youth is growing largely more conservative. I think that the youth is growing largely more libertarian. I think that the youth is growing largely less leftist and more liberal. I think that the youth is more adept with not just conservative ideals, but with sustainable ideals. I think that there are these days a good deal more young people looking towards investing, and not just looking to get rich through investing, not looking towards penny stocks or growth stocks, but looking towards dividend stocks and mutual funds and bonds as passive growth, as passive money makers, as passive means of money. And I am interested to see what that leads. But that is all the thoughts that I really have on this subject. I hope that you offer some thoughts in the comment section below, because I think that this is going to be, look, it's possible. Like the point that I was getting to at the beginning, the growth of religiosity seemed to be the main sticking point, the main thing developed into the social fabric that came out of the AIDS pandemic, that came out of a very liberal 80s into a 90s that were so conservative that even the Democratic president, Bill Clinton, was on many things, especially monetarily, very conservative. But yeah, I would love for you to share your thoughts in the comment section below, because I would love to have conversation around this.